We are so excited. This is a topic that I have wanted to do a masterclass on for quite a while because we have been asking all of you who have joined us for other masterclasses and live sessions what your goals and your professional needs are. And this topic of executive presence has come up over and over and over again. And so I am so grateful to Dr. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐿, who I will introduce in a moment, for joining us today to give us this free masterclass on how to feel confident and make an impact with our presence deliberately, strategically.
So to start us off, I really wanted to ask you guys a question. I want you to think about an emotion. What leader comes to mind when you think executive presence, and what emotion comes to mind? And I'm going to quickly share my screen with you. Let's go here, and I go to the current slide. All right, so here's the question I have for you. If executive presence were a person, I'd love for you to write this in the chat. What word would you use to describe them? Think of a leader. Think of someone, anyone. It doesn't have to be a leader in the traditional sense of the term. What emotion comes to your mind, or what image pops into your head? And if this executive presence that we're talking about were an individual, what word would you use to describe them? And you can do more than one response. I'm looking at some of your responses. Gravitas, trust. I like trust. Capable. I love capable. Someone says love. I don't think I've ever got that one before. Great listener, inspiring, confidence, approachability, empathy. I love that. Respect, reassuring. I love that. Calm and measured. Fearless. Somebody else said visionary. Smooth. I like smooth. You know what? One of the things that I always say, let's be clear. The people we think about, and these words that we're writing, purposeful, responsive, inspiring, these people weren't born like that. They weren't born with these characteristics, because it is something that you cultivate over time. I'm pretty confident that P.J. Patterson wasn't born with that self-assuredness. In fact, I thought he was born the opposite of self-assuredness. Executive presence is not just charisma. It's not just confident. Nobody wakes up confident. It is also not an innate trait that some people have and then some people don't have. It is a skill, and it can be learned and it can be cultivated. In fact, from my experience, everybody has some aspect of executive presence already. You just need to unlock it. And once you unlock it, then you're able to leverage it to achieve some of the goals that you have for yourself. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what exactly is executive presence and why it matters, so we can leave with a full understanding of it. And one of the things I want you guys to do as we go through this lesson together is assess your own executive presence, because it tends to be a very, very personal thing. Where you are at, where you're strong, and what areas you feel like there is an opportunity for growth. And at the end, I'd love for you to think of kind of your personal action plan that you are going to create to determine, okay, these are the areas that I need to work on, and be very intentional about that. So let's talk about executive presence. Usually, this is a concept that we hear about in corporate circles mostly, but you really don't hear it in healthcare. Certainly, I'm an academic. We rarely, unless there's a class on it in the business school, we rarely ever talk about executive presence. But it's one of those things that it doesn't matter what industry you operate in. It doesn't matter what space you operate in. Everybody could use executive presence. everybody has these tools that they can develop that will be really, really beneficial to take your career forward. So it really boils down to three ideas, three interrelated concepts. The first is gravitas, and I'm going to talk about each of them, and then we get into a little bit more detail. Gravitas is really the weight of your character. This is what gives you composure. And I'm so glad somebody said capability, because it's also your expertise. And I think we forget that aspect of it. The next component of it is communication. And in a nutshell, you basically just want the ability to communicate effectively. That's what you need. And then you have appearance, which is your physical presence, how you carry yourself. For me, because we live in a digital environment now and we have to operate virtually a lot of the times, I also think not just of personal presence, I also think of virtual presence. Now, how do you show up on Zoom? How do you show up in the digital spaces that you operate in? How do you show up on social media? Because I bet you right now, if I were sitting in my bedroom in my PJs and I have towels hanging all over the wall, then you wouldn't think I have much executive presence, and you probably wouldn't want to hear what I have to say. So we have to be conscious not just of how we carry ourselves, but also how we carry ourselves in the virtual spaces that we operate in. And one of the things I want you guys to remember is that executive presence is not just three separate pillars where you're a great communicator, but we say you have executive presence. You can be excellent as a communicator and you still don't have strong executive presence, because you want all three to work together. You can have great character, but you still do not exude that executive presence. So I want you to think of it as three different attributes, three different components that are interrelated, and they kind of ride on each other. Okay, so why does it matter? Why are we here talking about executive presence? For me, number one, it builds trust. Trust and credibility is the glue that you need for anything at all. Once you have trust, everything else will just seem like a snowball, because it is when people trust you and they think you're a credible person, that's when you can lead them. They will follow you because they recognize that you will be able to navigate challenging situations. And they are willing, even if they don't agree with you, and sometimes they don't, then they will trust your ideas and they will trust your leadership. That trust also helps you to be an excellent communicator. And if you want to build those skills, build that influence, start here, where you're building up your own trust, building up your personal credibility, so that once you start to communicate, it becomes a more effective exercise for you. It also obviously creates really strong relationships. If you want to lead a team, it helps you to be able to have trust with those that you work with, your employers, anybody that you have a relationship with, that you do business with. That trust creates a strongest level of executive presence, and it helps you, as you well know, that once you have good relationships, then you tend to see a lot more success in your career. And obviously, executive presence helps you to move your career forward. There is such a thing as perception, leadership perception. If people think that you are ready for higher level responsibilities, if they think that when you show up, you bring value to the table, then that is when opportunities open up for you. You get your promotions, you get growth opportunities that you're seeking. And from my experience, opportunities really does, it chases you down when people perceive you as very strong, that you have that X factor that will bring value to the table. So let's get into it in a little bit more detail. I don't know who you thought about when you said executive presence. I'm going to ask you to write it in the chat. Let me see what some of the people that you think about when you think have executive presence. And by the way, I have first dibs on Michelle Obama. Y'all can take Michelle Obama, because when I think gravitas, I think Michelle Obama. Now, this is Kamala Harris. Somebody said Kamala Harris, Oprah. That's a good suggestion. A former manager. I'm so glad that you thought that you're a former manager. Somebody says my dad. Oh, Paige. Oh, that is wonderful. Laisha Ward, I'm following her. Robert Mugabe before his demise. And I think that's very significant. Thank you so much for that suggestion, because you can actually lose executive presence based on your character, based on your action. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, gravitas is the foundation. You cannot have executive presence without gravitas. It is the core of this attribute. And I say this because gravitas is the weight of your character. Somebody enters a room and they have presence. Have you ever met somebody and they have presence? You don't know what it is, but they have presence. And there's a weight to them. That weight is character. They know what their personality is. And the strongest personality traits are human skills. And I want you to remember that. And they also lean into their core values. They lean into integrity and empathy, and they know what their values are, and they lead with that. And they become a little bit more grounded because of that self-knowledge and that self-awareness. And one of the things that I always come back to, I can't talk about the wife without talking about the husband. Can you imagine these two people living in the same house together? I think there's just too much gravitas in one room. So when we talk about gravitas, we're really talking about a dignity. For me, it's a seriousness of purpose. It doesn't mean they don't take themselves, they take themselves so seriously. It means that they mean business. When they come into the room, they have weight, they have strong character, and this kind of credibility gives them confidence. It makes them able to make decisions in tough times because they develop that composure when you're grounded in who you are, and when you're secure in the knowledge that you're a person of integrity, that you're kind, that you're compassionate, and you know this and you embody that, then you can operate even in difficult situations. In fact, you're unshakable in challenging situations, and we rally behind you because we may not always agree, but we trust you enough because we know that you can operate under pressure. And sometimes people think that gravitas is just this character. And once you're a great person, then you're naturally having executive presence. No, you have to have something to premise it on. And the leaders with executive presence or with gravitas tends to be deep thinkers. They know their field. Why is this thing keep falling out of my ear? They know their field. They have expertise. They become leaders in their industry. And not just knowledge and not just expertise, they're able to prove it as well. They have a track record of success and accomplishment. Think Tom Brady. He may not always win, but when he shows up, we know the value that he's going to bring to the team. And he has had a track record of success. So when that team member shows up, we know, yes, we know what they're going to deliver. So you have to deliver the same thing, not just having strong character, which is great, but backing that up with deep knowledge, with expertise, being trusted for your expertise, and showing successful accomplishments to give weight to that gravitas. So for me, executive presence is tantamount to having a strong personal brand. I'm not talking about your social media. I'm not talking about your following. I'm not talking about how many likes that you could possibly get on social media. That's not your personal brand. Your personal brand is who you are at core and the unique value that you bring to the table in your industry. And I want us to do just a little exercise. But before we get to that, if you don't remember anything I say today, I created the 6 C's of gravitas. And it starts with character, knowing yourself, who you are as a person. And once you know yourself, it grounds you. And this is what gives you composure. Once you're composed and you can back that up with capability, that is what gives you credibility. You want to build credibility? Start with character. Then once you have that down, you tend to be a more grounded, a more composed individual. And once you get expertise, experience, you're accomplishing things in your industry, then you develop a credibility that will move you forward. And it's the credibility that gives you confidence. And I know you know fake people and fake confidence. You've seen it. Real confidence is when you have character and capability together. And then you would be able to communicate your value and communicate in different spaces. Here's one thing I want from you. I want you to write this down. You can share it with us in the chat. What is one of your strongest personality traits? Think about it. Write it down in the chat. Share it with us. Because that personality trait is a human skill. I'm so glad we're not calling it soft skills anymore. They're not soft. They're not hard either, but they're powerful skills that we overlook. And if we could thank the pandemic for anything, it's that movement towards the self and showing that skills like empathy, those traits, kindness, compassion, those are solid human skills that you need in leadership, that you need to navigate the workplace, a lot of it very toxic workplaces, and you can use your human skills to navigate conflict, to, it's so important to have that because you get along harmoniously with your colleagues when you are aware of what your human skills, and especially when you can leverage those human skills. People are saying trustworthiness, curiosity, candor, and compassion. Here's what I want you to do as you move out of this class. Think about how you can draw on, deliberately and intentionally, draw on your thoughtfulness, draw on your curiosity, draw on your kindness, to navigate workplace situations. Think of a conflict. Think of any workplace situation that you're dealing with. How can you draw on your intelligence, your determination? One client said to me, her value is joy. And I was like, wow. So the next thing I'm moving on to is, what is your core value? Know it, embody it. Can you write in the chat for me? What is your core value? And when I say core value, I mean the principles that you live by. What do you stand for? Because remember, people can't see inside of us. So the manifestation of our values tend to come from what they see us do in our day-to-day actions. But I want you guys to be so aware of your core values and draw on it. Now, my mother, I tell my mother that I believe in family. She said, no, you don't. You wouldn't move to Australia if you believed in family. But I had to at that time. But we make our fundamental decisions based on our values, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And it's important when you are developing in your career to make your decisions based on your values. Sometimes we lean into our organizational values, but there comes a time when sometimes you're working on a project and your values don't align with the project's values. You may be working at an organization that no longer aligns with your values, and that disconnect will cause you to take stock. And you have to make a decision whether you can work or find a way to work on values that you can connect on. So somebody said authentic. I love that because your human skills and your core values together become your authentic self. And the leaders with executive presence tend to figure this thing out. They clarify these values and they also lean into them to navigate their workplace, professional and personal situation. So if you're a committed person, I had one client who said she was committed, and I said, explain, how do you leverage that? And she said she would tell her clients that I will fly from Tampa Bay to Detroit in person, and I'll give you the same commitment at 8 a.m. as I will give you at 10 p.m. And I thought it was a really solid example of how she will use her core values to push her business forward. So let's move on to communication. For me, communication is the bridge. I say a bridge, I hate bridges, by the way. I am so scared of bridges. I don't know what it is, but I get really nervous when I'm crossing a bridge, but we have to, right? We have to get to the other side. It's a bridge because you can have all the gravitas in the world. If you can't communicate, it's not as useful, because it's communication that's the bridge that you are able to use your gravitas to get a problem solved and to relate with a team to move a project forward. It spans differences. Communication fosters understanding. You need communication to facilitate action. In every single arena, you need it to resolve conflicts. There is no way that you can execute executive presence without having this aspect of it. And obviously, communication is a big place. So we're going to talk verbal and nonverbal, even though they work together. And I want to show you a photo, and I want to ask you a question. Somebody mentioned Oprah before, and we know she is the god of communication. What are you seeing in this photograph? We're in a nonverbal communication here. Can you write in the chat for me and tell me what are the elements of nonverbal communication that you are witnessing here? Somebody says listening intensely, yes. Engagement, confidence, active listening posture, leaning in. A couple of people said posture, thoughtfulness, she's not folding her arms, straight eye contact. I like that. She's very attentive, intentional, is it intention, reflective of intensity. Yes, yes, she's really, really listening. And this is the genius of Oprah Winfrey. I read where she said when she is preparing for an interview, what she wants to accomplish is to make the interviewee feel seen and feel heard and feel special. I mean, that's not hard, but it's so difficult for us to do that. But one of the ways in which she has done that, she said, is I listen 3 times as much as I talk. I've been trying to work on my active listening, because it's not just hearing somebody. We're not deaf. I mean, there may be people who are deaf on this call, but generally speaking, if you can hear, it doesn't mean that you're listening. You can simply hear. But listening is paying close attention to the speaker's words and the speaker's emotion as well. You can't do that by looking at your phone. You can't do that by being distracted. And so I myself, I think this is one area of executive presence where I think I could do some work. And I'm very intentional about practicing when people are talking to really, really try to pay attention and to lean in. Now, I want to ask you guys to do something. Don't write it in the chat. You don't have to. What do you think is your biggest communication challenge? The reason I say you don't have to write it in the chat is it is so personal, communication challenges, because from my experience coaching for the last 25 years, say somebody comes in with a stutter. It may be the result of trauma, maybe something negative experience. It may be something people said. I had one client, brilliant lawyer who works for the United Nations in the Congo, and her colleagues, she didn't feel they were listening to her, and she felt it was racial. She's Black, they're French from France, and she took it so personally, not being heard, that we had great challenges trying to get her to get other techniques for them to pay attention, for her to feel like they're paying attention. So it can be very, very personal. So what do you think is your biggest communication challenges? Some people said being busy, trying to understand where the other person is coming from. Hurry is the killer of good communication. I actually like that. When I'm in a hurry, I shortcut relational connection. That is so very true. Trying to understand, paying attention, staying engaged. I have to admit this. Just recently, my partner said to me, every time I'm talking to you, you're on the phone. I was so embarrassed. So as soon as he shows up, I put my phone away, or I put it on silent, because I wasn't aware that I wasn't paying attention, getting distracted. So I just want you to be aware of what those challenges are. And if you're honest about where you can create more effective communication habits, I mean, communication is so big that you can decide you're going to do a whole series of training in communication, and I would encourage that. But I think it's important for your day-to-day jobs to think of the areas that you can work on. Where am I weak, and how can I be more intentional of getting to cultivate stronger communication habits? I'll just put it like that. All right. There are a couple of things I want to talk about in the time that we have left. And I want to separate verbal from nonverbal, and this for a particular reason. When we say verbal communication, we want you to speak with clarity. You want to execute executive presence? Speak with clarity. Don't ramble along. Know what you're going to say first, say second, and say third. Practice on your kids, practice on your colleagues, practice on your partners. It doesn't matter. Practice anything you are conveying. Have an intro, have a middle, and have the end. 3 ideas. Structuring your ideas is how you get your message to be clear. The other thing that I would encourage is always have support for your arguments. If you ever listen to Barack Obama, he has an anecdote or a story or an example or a data point. Bring some evidence to the table, because it gives credibility to what you're saying when you don't just make an assertion, that you're able to back up that assertion with some kind of evidence. The next thing is knowing your audience. And I think maybe I should have started with this one. Understand their thoughts, understand their values, understand their feelings. You don't have to have the same values. You don't have to feel the same way about the subject. But if you understand their feelings, their values, you're able to connect. Otherwise, it's going to bounce off them, especially in this silly season where if we don't share the same political ideas, if we don't share the same opinion on a particular issue, then it becomes a disagreement. How you bridge that is to understand what they are saying first, acknowledge it. Even to say you understand the point, you don't have to agree, just understand it, because connection is the thing that we miss in effective communication. You can speak well, you can command the room, but if you're not connecting with me, I am not hearing you, I'm not remembering it, and I will dispose of what you're saying. And giving and receiving feedback. Do you remember that human skill I asked you to draw on, and those core values? If you could pick one quickly, and when you're giving feedback, you lean into that. For example, I'm a very pragmatic person. So if I'm giving feedback, obviously I'm going to uphold your integrity, but I'm going to be really practical, and I'm telling you what it is. And obviously, if I'm an empathetic person, I'm leaning more into that because I want to come across who I am. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that I'm an empathetic person. So always try to lean into those skills when you're communicating. And that's the secret to handling conversations with confidence and with grace. And if we had time, then we could do a few scenarios where you're able to draw on your particular human skill, not somebody else's, your own value to navigate situations that are happening in your workplace in particular, rather than a hypothetical situation, because you want to draw on your skills to navigate the workplace as you are experiencing it. Let's move on to nonverbal, even though these two operate together. I think everybody is clear that active listening is a secret to effective communication, and I add connecting, really connecting with people. Making eye contact. Now, I lived in Australia and New Zealand before moving to the United States, and I have a lot of friends from Japan. If you're older, you're not meant to make eye contact. It doesn't show you have to bow your head, not make eye contact, because that's a sign of respect in that culture. But in Western culture, we expect people to make eye contact, because when you don't, we're reading you as shy, we're reading you as disinterested, we're reading you not positively. So facial expression, it says a lot when you smile. It's open, it's welcoming. Gestures are important. It makes, even when you're on the Zoom, if I were to not show my hands, it would be a little stiff. I mean, I'm good with using my eyes and my smile and stuff like that. But if you're using your hands, you're more open, it looks more effective, you're more you come across more comfortable. Personal space is one thing. Go too close, then it may feel a little hostile or too intimate. If you stay too far away, you're not bridging as effectively as you should. Touch, be careful of this in the workplace. Not everybody likes to be touched, but some people are very touchy-feely. When they're talking, they're touching you a lot. And so you be very aware. I prefer respecting people's space rather than touching them, unless you're saying, can I hug you? In a situation that requires an embrace. Vocal quality. Now, my voice was trained because I wanted to be a broadcaster, but there are leaders who have had their voice trained so that they don't sound too shrill, because if you sound too high, then you don't come across with the authority that you want for executive presence. You do want to sound a little bit more moderate right here, not too low, not too high. You want to stay here, and that requires practice. Some people talk too fast, especially when they're nervous. You want to slow that down so that when you're communicating, it's at a pace that people can understand. Not too slow, not too fast, but at a pace that they can understand clearly what you're saying. And obviously appearance. Clothes maketh the man. Our clothes communicate. And I'll say that you wouldn't show up at a Little League game in your three-piece suit. You'll scare the kids. I promise. So be aware. And that brings me to the third aspect of executive presence. I call this your first impression. You can come into a room and you can have presence, but we notice you. We see you physically. And so let me just ask you a question here. Pretend you don't know these people. You have no idea who they are, but they arrive at your office and they're meant to give a presentation. Can you write in the chat for me and tell me, what do you think about the guy on the left? What is the first impression that you get? You don't know him. He just shows up to deliver a presentation, much like a swan. So say someone said lazy, the other person says too casual, informal, doesn't care what others think, relative. I'm not sure what you mean by relative, Felica. Casual, people are saying casual. What do you think about the woman on the right? You don't know who she is. What is your first impression? Doesn't take himself seriously. Kathy says, I don't get any of those. What do you get? Tell me what you get, Kathy. For the woman, people are saying professional, business, crisp, professional. Personally, I would attribute less importance to his message. Okay. I find her confident, stylish, friendly. The man on the left actually has a lot of information. He seems informed. The woman on the right has presence. All right. Now for me, Steve Jobs. So we know who he is. His genius is his executive presence. I don't think we'll be here having this conversation in this format without what he created for the world. So we're grateful for his life. Now, he reached the point where he didn't care. His clothes was not important. Nothing is wrong with a black shirt and a jeans. That's a nice, clean look. The sneakers could be a little bit new, and I would add a belt. And I'm into personal branding, so I would add a belt to this look. And for women, and I think Black women in particular, and women generally, we tend to be judged very harshly, more harshly than men. Men get away with wearing whatever they feel like. Women, not so much, unfortunately. And so for me, I want you to understand, and industry matters. I get you totally. I'm an academic. There's no dress code. You wear what you want. But because I'm teaching communication and public relations, I want my students to give a first impression. So I tend to wear certain things. But if I'm going to talk to teenagers at a high school, I will dress down a little bit because I don't want to seem overly executive. So the situation matters a lot. So let me just say a few things about clothes, because I believe that everybody has to understand their own aesthetic. What is your personal brand, and how do you convey your personal brand through your dress? For a lot of people, it's cultural. It's religious. They wear their religious garment, or the garment of their culture, or the garment of their ethnic group. It doesn't matter so much. As long as you dress professionally, I would say clean, a polished look, and make sure it's appropriate for the occasion. It should be industry dependent, but also situation dependent. And I'm going to bring in some nonverbal stuff here. I also believe that it doesn't matter what you wear. If you show up and you have good posture, you're smiling, you're making good eye contact, you're projecting energy, you have enthusiasm in your body language, then your clothes is secondary. But generally speaking, I would say dress for the occasion, be clean, be polished no matter what you're wearing. It's easier if you're dressed up to dress down. For the gentleman, you can take off your jacket, roll up your shirt. Easy to do that. For women, you can take off your high heels, and it's easier to pull down than it is when you're underdressed to try to level up in that space. And that's where I will end that aspect of it. There are ways in which, if you cultivate all of those areas, your gravitas, who you are as a person, your unique value and your core values and your personality, and ground yourself in that, and your communication skills and your appearance, you will find that you can only go upwards in your career. It's a tool that people underestimate. It's not talked about a lot. It's not studied a lot, but I'm so glad so many of you are here trying to learn more about it and how you can develop your own executive presence. I want you to do something for me. So now that you have the three areas, gravitas, which is more your character, your composure, and your expertise, communication, big place, verbal, nonverbal communication, connecting, and appearance. How do you rate yourself generally? On a scale of 1 to 5, 1, I need significant improvement, to be honest now, and 5, I'm exceptional. So people are leaning into 4, 3. So a few people say we're in the middle. We're in the middle, and that's really honest. Somebody actually says 1, significant improvement. That is super honest. I appreciate that. 4, a lot of people say, nobody says 5. In person 5. Somebody says in person 5 and online 3. The online space is a bit difficult though. I remember teaching online. We all remember it, don't we? And you have to do a little bit more. Ooh, you have to come out of yourself a little bit more for the online environment. 5 on appearance, but closer to 2 on speaking with confidence. And I like that honesty. Here's what I want you to do with it. As we leave, I know you're going to crush it too. As you leave, I want you to create a personal action plan. And here's what I want you to put on it. Overall strengths. In terms of the areas where you know you're absolutely confident. Like some people said, clothing, I'm number 5. I show up, I'm crisp, I'm clean, I'm ready for Vogue, and I'm effective. And what are the areas where you feel like you could need a little growth? I need a little tweaking here. And you want to be honest about those things and be very specific when you're writing down your plan. And then outline at least 3 steps, 3 specific steps that you can take. It may be attending a class of this nature, a workshop. It may be getting a mentor or something. I know my mother spent so much money for my voice to be trained, and I'm so grateful to her. Poor woman in rural Jamaica didn't know what I was talking about, but I insisted that I needed to get my voice trained because I saw my future ahead of me. And it required communication. If you see your goals ahead of you and it requires you to be an effective communicator, what actions are you going to take to make sure that you're leveling up in the areas that you feel need the most improvement? And I know you're going to crush it. See, crush it. And I'm happy to take some questions, and Alison, my colleague, will facilitate this section. Thank you guys so much. You've been great.
Thank you so much. I absolutely loved this session. I learned so much, and I also think it's incredible the way that in such a short period of time, you were able to give all of our attendees really specific tools and practices. So really like incredibly impactful. So first, actually, I have some questions for our audience. So I am launching a poll now. You should be able to see it on your screen now. A big takeaway that we like to get from these masterclasses is a sense for whether you would like to see more from us in this area. We are always growing and always offering new programs. So our first question, this is a 4-question poll. Our first question for you is, what is or are your top goal or goals for refining your executive presence? What do you want to get out of this? Why are you here? And the choices are advance in your current job, increase effectiveness in your current role, change careers or roles, or establish a public presence in your industry, something like conferences, LinkedIn, kind of an influencer role. Question 2 is, which of the following skills are you most interested in learning through a course on executive presence? And you can check all that apply. Identifying your unique value proposition, communicating with confidence and decisiveness, commanding a room, implementing effective communication skills, setting your goals and objectives, adapting to distinct audiences, or curating a professional appearance. Question number 3 is, which of the following course titles is most compelling to you if we were to launch this as a course? The choices are executive presence, communicate with confidence, presence with power, cultivating your executive presence, leading with influence, unleashing your executive presence, and the executive edge, mastering presence and influence. And then last and most importantly is, now that you've helped us name it and create the content for it, how likely would you be to actually enroll in this program? We're envisioning a 6-week course that would be mostly asynchronous, so mostly on your own time. And the price point is going to be about $2,800. And our answer choices are from very likely to very unlikely. And so I'm going to keep this poll open. We take your answers incredibly seriously. And we only have time for a couple of questions, but we will get to them. So once again, if you have a question, click on the bottom bar of Zoom, click on Q&A, and type and submit your questions there. And Hume, our first question for you is, how does humility fit into Gravitas?
You know, that's a very, very good question. One of the things that I used to believe is that the person who exudes executive presence had to be overtly confident. And so if somebody was more reserved, I would not read them as having executive presence. Now I've learned over time through coaching on personal branding that everybody comes with their own brand, their own character. And if as your personality, if you're a humble person, if you are someone who looks out for other people, it doesn't mean you're not a confident person. It means that you're leaning into that aspect, and humility then becomes your strength, because everybody has to lean into what they bring to the table and leverage that to navigate various situations. And in places where, for example, my students would say that, how do they navigate a job interview if they're very quiet, they come across shy? I said, well, own it, and say, this is how I come across, but this is what I can deliver. Humility is part of who you are. Lead with that. Lean into it, own it, embody it, and show how it's a valuable characteristic and trait that you can leverage in the workplace.
Thank you. That's an incredible answer. The next question, I think we're going to just take two more, unfortunately. You were all asking such incredible questions. I apologize that we have run out of time. But the next question for you is, can you give us some more tips for having a strong Zoom executive presence?
Okay, well, number one, make sure that you're making eye contact with the lens of the camera and not your face. If I was looking down at my face right now, okay, really nice makeup, but here is where my audience is. So I literally have my computer up on a box because my audience is right over there, where the little green, what is it? That lens of the camera is right in front of me. So even if Allison is talking to me and she's over there on her little screen, I am glancing up here because I know that's where her face is. That's one thing. Posture, making sure that you're sitting upright, that you're framing your screen, that we're not looking at your ceiling, but we're looking at you. So you're going to do a medium frame that we can see your arms and your torso so that you can look a little bit more relaxed. Make sure that your environment is very clean and very professional, and treat the virtual environment in the same way that you would treat a professional meeting. Same respect, same decorum. Yes, you're at home and your bed is next door, but in this space, it's a professional space. You're at work, and treated with that same regard. Yeah.
Thank you. Great answer. And this is the last question that we have time for today, but because you are also interested, hopefully we'll have a full course that will give you another chance to ask your questions. And this question is about generational changes. Have you seen a change in the sort of expressions of executive presence that is resonating on a macro level with younger generations like Gen Z and Alpha?
Absolutely. Let's talk of parents. They do not care. As they should. I do, let me just use this example of my college students. I do a job interview simulation with them every semester. And we talk about, that first impression, dressing up for an interview. And some of them won't. And they say, well, I'm doing a job as a teacher, or I want to be a mechanic. Why do I need to dress up? And so I don't have an issue with your personal aesthetic. I'm saying that for a job interview, your first impression is going to communicate a lot. And so there are differences. Some of it I value because they're authentic. They do talk a lot about what their needs are. And we may read it sometimes as entitled when we're older, but I'm so appreciative of them for raising some of the issues that we tended to overlook in the past. One of the things that I'm realizing is that in terms of how Black women show up in the past, Black women weren't getting a lot of promotions because it was felt that we don't have gravitas, or we're natural hair and, stuff like that. And I think a lot of that has changed, thankfully, where the workplace is more inclusive, even though there's a lot of fight over that now. But the workplaces are more inclusive of people's personal aesthetic. It's more driven with your vigor, your enthusiasm for the job, versus, okay, you simply need to dress how we dress. You can still look professional and maintain your own aesthetic. There is an issue in terms of inclusivity that it wasn't mentioned in the past for leaders to be aware of their own ethos. These days, when you look at executive presence, inclusivity is a big factor. Empathy shows up a lot. But my thing is, I'm not asking you to be empathetic if you aren't. Or have integrity. You should have integrity as a matter of course. And you should deal with people in a way that upholds their dignity. Figure out who you are and how you relate. What is your personality? What is your personal brand? What is your core value? And if you can lean into that, then you would be able to access some of those things. That is not generational. Integrity and character will always be significant and will always be important. But things like dress, levels of confidence, those things change a lot, and as some of them should, for real.
Thank you. That's so helpful. I really love the way that you covered both what is evergreen, what changes with time, and also both the positive and negative aspects of that. Thank you so much. This was absolutely incredible. And I think we can see from the thoughtful questions and the enthusiastic participation in the chat that this really resonated with everyone. And I thank you all for being here today, taking time out of your busy schedule. And I'm really hopeful that we will have a course that you can enroll in to continue to learn from Dr. Johnson at
Can I
Brown
just say one
University.
thing, Allison?
Yeah,
Someone
please.
asked about voice training twice. You can reach out to me to discuss that.
Mhm.
But voice training is really about developing the instrument and making sure that, because I can talk like this, and then I can talk like this because I am using more breath and it going through my diaphragm, and it's a very intense process, not just speech. That was voice, because I needed that sound to be more authoritative and change my cadence, my tone. So if you need to do that, if you feel that that is a need, there are courses that you can take to kind of hone those skills. Sorry, Allison, go ahead. I just felt I didn't want that person to feel ignored.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's a great tip. And I hope everyone does leave feeling empowered and feeling more embodied in your voice, whether that is through vocal training or through
Exactly.
feeling more clear about gravitas, appearance, and message. So thank you. This was incredibly helpful, incredibly tangible. And we hope we get to see you all in our classroom again, either for a future masterclass, or hopefully we will have an executive presence full course for you. So take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.